What's up everyone, my name is Thomas and welcome back to Film Fanatics. Today I'm going to be reviewing the new movie Zombieland Double Tap, which is the sequel to Zombieland that came out back in 2009. Zombieland Double Tap is a comedic zombie flick where we follow the original four characters, Columbus, Tallahassee, Wichita, and Little Rock, played by Jesse Eisenberg, Woody Harrelson, Emma Stone, and Abigail Breslin respectively, joined by a few new faces as they try to find Little Rock when she runs away to find other survivors her own age. The film was written by Dave Callaham, Rhett Reese, and Paul Wernick. It was directed by Reuben Fleisher, and Chung-hoon Chung helmed the cinematography. Before I go on, make sure you smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Helps me out and lets me know that you like the content. So when I first heard about this movie coming out, I told my wife and she was ecstatic because she loves the first Zombieland movie. She got me to watch the first one before we went and saw this one, and it was alright. It was entertaining and funny, but I didn't really find anything special about it, and that's kind of the expectations I went in watching Double Tap. So the filmmakers did a really good job of making this feel like the original one. They captured the tone really well. It's still pretty lighthearted and funny all throughout, and I think they did a really good job recreating that and adding a little more to that, even 10 years later. Which is a long time for a sequel in between sequels, and I thought they did a really good job still capturing that same spark that they had in the first one. This was definitely fan service for the first one, so if you enjoyed the first one, you'll definitely enjoy this movie. I actually thought this movie was a little bit funnier. More of the jokes landed for me. I found more things comedic in this, and I really think I laughed more in this one than I did the first one. And that's not saying the first one's not funny. I just thought they did a really good job of making this funny and lighthearted. So this one, as opposed to the first one, has a lot less zombie killing in it, which the first one didn't have a ton of it in it, but it was really about how the outbreak is first starting, and then this one is 10 years later. So there's not as much zombie killing in the first one, at least I don't think there is. That's how it feels to me. However, the character interactions really keep this movie interesting and keep it from being too boring. Having said that, not every character in this is perfect, 10 out of 10 or whatever. Madison, who's one of the new faces that Columbus and Tallahassee find, she joins along, and she's supposed to play the stereotypical blonde girl, like dumb blonde girl, and they go way too over the top with her at certain points. She's very, very annoying, especially in the first part of the film, even towards the middle. She can be very annoying and really distracting. It really just takes away from the movie for me. And even her interactions with Columbus and Tallahassee and later Wichita, they all just, every time she opened her mouth, I was bothered. Really every time she was on screen, I was bothered. She was never really all that funny. All she did was just, she tried to be funny, but it was trying way too hard, and it ended up being very annoying. So if you haven't seen the first Zombieland, a little bit of a spoiler warning here, but the relationship between Columbus and Wichita was really forced in this movie. Not necessarily the relationship itself, but the conflict they tried to add to it. I'm going to go a little bit more in detail during my spoiler talk here in just a few minutes, but I felt like what they tried to do with their relationship really didn't work, and it didn't seem, it felt very out of character, especially for Wichita at certain points. And again, I'll go into it more in depth later, but it just doesn't really work for me here. One of my biggest problems with the story is just the lack of structure it has. I can kind of see a loose structure, but for me it feels more like you start off with the first act, then we start going into a second act, and then it kind of goes back into a first act kind of thing, but then it goes into like another like 10 to 15 minute second act, and then it goes into the third act. The story structure's all over the place, and I can kind of see how there's a first set, kind of sloppy second one, and then a third. But for me, it really just feels like they can't really decide what story they want to go on until the very end. And then it kind of gets back on track. It just, in the second act especially, is when it really gets out of whack. For most viewers, that's not going to be that much of a bother, but for me, and for somebody who pays attention to these kinds of things, it really bothered me. There's also a lot of narration by Columbus in this movie. It was used pretty heavily in the first one. However, I feel like it was used better in the first one. In the first part of the movie, the narration's fine. It feels a lot like the first one and actually adds a lot to the style of the film when it's done right. However, there's points in the film where there's narration that really doesn't need to be there, and all it really does is just take me out of the movie a little bit and distract me. I feel like there should have been some of that narration cut out. From a technical standpoint, this movie really isn't much to look at. It has its own unique style, and I think it keeps that very consistent throughout the movie. I think it does a really good job conveying that style and that tone that they want to go with, that light, kind of fun zombie killing movie. I think it does that pretty well. There's also a few shots here and there that I actually really enjoyed. The opening title sequence, I thought that was shot pretty well. When our characters approach like a big building, it goes from kind of a like close up, not really a close up, but it's a tracking shot, like aerial tracking shot, and then we kind of go up the building until we go to the top of the building and see everything that's going on up there. I don't want to like spoil too much for you, but I thought that shot was really interesting. I was actually pretty awed by that shot. I really enjoyed how it looked. I think it's probably CG, but I really don't care. I still thought the shot looked really cool. It was noticeable in the film too. It's not like something I was just like, oh, that's neat, and then it passed by. It actually stuck with me. If there's any shot that's stuck with me from the film, it's actually that one. I thought it was pretty cool. Also, there's a use of little titles. If you've seen the first one, you know what I'm talking about with Columbus's rules. It uses that really well in this movie. They're not as prominent as in the first because the rules have already been established. However, there's one scene in the film where it's Columbus and another character going back and forth, and the use of titles there is really really interesting. I think it does a really good job of portraying the not really power struggle, but the back and forth kind of banter. I think it does a really good job of adding to that and adding to the style of the movie as well. Like I said before, there's nothing really technically amazing about this film. It does what it does just to entertain the audience, and as long as it does that purpose, it's fine. So overall, though, the movie wasn't technically amazing. Like the score, for example, it was pretty mediocre and forgettable. I really don't remember anything about it. Most of the cinematography, except for the few shots I mentioned earlier, it's pretty bland. The lighting's fine. The feel of the movie, it feels pretty consistent. It feels like an apocalyptic land they're living in. But overall, everything was just kind of meh. So I'm about to go into a spoiler talk, so if you don't want to be spoiled for Zombieland Double Tap, skip to this point in the video, and okay, there's your warning. 3, 2, 1, let's go. So I really have two main issues I want to speak with here. Some stuff I really thought was bothersome and really took away from the film. The first one being Columbus and Wichita's relationship. I thought it was handled very weird in the movie. So Columbus proposes to Wichita, which they've been together for 10 years at this point, keep that in mind. He proposes to her in the bedroom, in private, whatever. She gets freaked out by it. Her and Little Rock book it out of town. She's gone for a month. Then Columbus and Tallahassee go to a local shopping mall where they run into Madison. From there, Madison's been alone for this whole 10-year period. And so she goes back with Columbus and Tallahassee. She sleeps with Columbus, and then all of a sudden Wichita just shows back up out of nowhere. She's trying to steal some of their weapons and ammunition, saying that Little Rock just ran away with this dude, with Berkeley. And then she finds Madison there. And then the whole movie, Columbus and Wichita just kind of go back and forth in their banter with each other, and it's really just them taking shots at each other, and it goes on for about half to 3/4 of the movie, and then there's no real progression that's being made throughout this duration in their relationship. There's a point where they think Madison is going to turn into a zombie, so Columbus has to take her out into the woods and shoot her, but he shoots above her head and just gets back in and whatever. And then they find Madison again, and they're back at each other's throats. Columbus and Wichita are. And then at the very end of the movie, Wichita is just like, yes, I'll marry you, for like no reason. The only reason I can maybe think of is that she's seen Columbus be so brave and, all of this stuff, which he's already been in the first movie, which is why they got together in the first place. But if it's because he's brave, that's so out of her character. She's such like a bad, I don't need a man if they're not worthy of me kind of character. And then if it's this kind of thing, it's very sexist and out of her character to just be like, okay, fine, we'll get married. Also don't get why she left in the first place. I know that her whole thing is that she can't open up and she's scared of commitment and everything, but they've been together for 10 years at this point. Why is this all of a sudden, why is this just now a problem? This really bothered me during the film, just watching it. I was like, I don't understand what your motive is for leaving. I mean, she says it, but it's like, no, you've been together for 10 years. Why is this all of a sudden a problem? My whole story structure complaint Goes back to the plot line at the Elvis hotel thing with Nevada. Tallahassee ends up sleeping with this woman that's here at this hotel. Two other guys that are pretty much carbon copies of Tallahassee and Columbus. It was Albuquerque and Flagstaff, respectively. They go back at it back and forth, and all of a sudden the copycat clones turn into zombies and try to kill everybody. They get killed, and then Nevada and Tallahassee are like, hey, see you later. She ends up staying there, and then they go, and then the main characters go to Babylon, where they try to find Little Rock. Nothing's mentioned of Nevada again until at their time of need, when all the zombies are crawling or about to kill them all. She comes through in the monster truck and starts killing everybody. This plot line really felt like a waste of time. Felt like something to pad on the runtime, because it really didn't do much of anything. Oh, hello. My cat has come to say hello. Robin has joined the review. He's wanting to say hey. Say hey. Say hey. He's cute. So really, this plot line doesn't really have much to do with anything. If anything, it gives Tallahassee kind of a reason to come back, something to do after this adventure, like he's wanting to do. Can you stop bumping my mic? But yeah, I can kind of get that, but the other two characters were complete filler. Didn't really do anything in the film except add. There was a couple laughs I got in there, and the title scene between Columbus and Flagstaff was actually pretty entertaining, like I mentioned earlier. But other than that, it was really kind of pointless and made it almost felt like another first act, because it felt like they were trying to set something else up, and then it just abruptly ends, and then we go into the 10-15 minute long second act I was telling you about, and then it goes into the third act. Also, I know the film's not taking itself too seriously. I know we're not supposed to nitpick, and it doesn't really matter because it's just about having fun. I have a few nitpicks that I want to share here real quick. Rapid fire round nitpicks, let's go. How is there still power 10 years later? I know in the movie they said that there's a dam that's still keeping power going, but don't people need to work there to get everything working, and at the power companies and everything? Doesn't add up. Nitpick. Next. How did Madison last 10 years in that one cooler? You'll run out of food eventually, and then she'd have to go outside and get more food, and you cannot convince me that she is smart enough to not get eaten by zombies. She is a complete airhead and would have gotten eaten the first time she left the cooler. Next. Columbus and the gang have been staying at the White House for years now, probably at least 9 years, and they've probably been going to the same shopping mall over and over again. There's no way that they haven't completely raided this thing already, gotten every non-perishable out, and they haven't found Madison already. I don't buy that unless she came in at certain. I don't care. It's a nitpick. It doesn't work for me. Next, all of these pacifist hippies don't really make sense in the zombie apocalypse. Just think about it. There would have been probably 10 to 15 whenever the zombie apocalypse first started. You're telling me they weren't eating then. You're telling me that they've grown up since. They've become pacifists and don't want to kill the zombies, and then created their own little colony. No, I don't buy that for a second. Every one of them should be dead. They would all be eaten because they don't like killing zombies. You don't want to kill a zombie? That's fine. I hope you like being food. Next, as Tallahassee thinks he's going to be splitting away from the group, he's in a truck, which where did that come from? He's driving off and sees a horde of zombies heading towards Babylon. So you're telling me he has time to drive back to Babylon, warn everybody, develop a plan, practice the plan, and set up everything all before the zombies all get there? No, that is BS. Next. I've got several more. I'm a nitpick king, but I'm going to leave them in my back pocket. I think I've made my point. Overall, the movie's not terrible. I still enjoyed myself. It was pretty entertaining. And I was never bored during it, and I actually laughed quite a few times. However, it's just not the most well-made movie of the year. The purpose of this movie really is just to entertain the audience, have a good few laughs, and then we go home. I feel like a movie kind of like this is Baby Driver. I'm sure Shaun of the Dead's a lot more like this. I just haven't seen the movie. But Baby Driver, I feel like accomplishes the same kind of thing, but it's a much better well-made movie. And I prefer films that take more of an artistic approach when they're made. Overall, though, it's not too bad, and I'm going to give Zombieland Double Tap a 4 out of 10. I know that probably seems like a harsh rating, even though I'm saying I kind of enjoyed it. I'm just saying it's not that bad. Well, will I watch it again? Probably not. I'm probably going to forget most of it by next week. But overall, though, I'm not sad that I spent the money on it. I still enjoyed myself, enjoyed the experience, and I'm glad I went and saw it. So, have you seen Zombieland Double Tap? What did you think? If you like this video, make sure you give it a like. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. We'll see you next time. My name is Thomas. Peace out.